mass balance problems blended component. Next two problems would deal with the analysis of number of degrees of freedom, and once the NDF is equal to 0, we can say that the problem can be solved. In this example here, we have a simple process flow diagram, and we have two input streams going into the process. This is the first one, this is the second input, and this is the output stream. The mass flow rate of the material M1 going into the process has composition of X1, that's the kilograms of A per kilogram, and 1 minus X1 kilograms of B per kilogram. The second stream going into the process has mass flow rate of 30 kilograms per hour with the composition of 30% A and 70% of B. The output from the process, the output stream has the mass flow rate of M2 with the composition of X2 kilograms of A per kilogram and 1 minus X2 kilograms of B per kilogram. The question now is if by having this information can we solve the problem. So actually we have to decide if NDF is equal 0 or not. If it is equal 0, it means that we can solve the problem. Let's have a look at the number of unknowns that we have here. The first one would be M1 and X1. 1 minus X1 is also unknown, but once we know the X1, we can figure it out 1 minus X1. The second input stream has known composition and mass flow rate, so no unknowns are related to input 2 into the process, and the output stream has unknown M2, so this is the one unknown, and composition fraction of A kilograms of A per kilogram X2 would be unknown. So we have 4 unknowns. And how many balances can we generate from the process? So the number of balances is equal to the number of species participating in the process. So here we have two components, we have A and B, therefore we can have 2 balances. Is it n equal to 0? N, by the definition, is equal to number of unknowns minus number of independent equations. So in our case this is equal 4 minus 2, which is equal 2. Therefore problem cannot be solved. We need to have additional information so that the n could be equalized to 0, then the problem would be solvable. In the next problem, we have process flow diagram with 2 input streams going into the process. So this is input 1, input 2, and 2 output streams, 3 and 4. And we have components A and B going into the process with the composition of sulfuric acid, nitric acid, and water. For stream B, for stream A, we have 2 components. We have sulfuric acid and water, sulfuric acid and water. For the output stream, we have component or the mass C with the composition 2 components, nitric acid and water. And the second output stream has a component D, which is equal to 1000 kilograms, with 3 components, sulfuric acid, nitric acid, and water. So in order to be able to answer the question, yes, the problem can be solved, we have to run the analysis of number of degrees of freedom. So n is equal to the number of unknowns minus number of independent equations. So when we look at the number of unknowns, at the process flow diagram, when we look at the process, our unknowns include components A, B, C, D is not our unknown, since we know that it is equal, the mass of D is equal to 1000 kilograms. Then we have to look at the composition of each of the stream, and for A we have three components. We have sulfuric acid, nitric acid and water. No information is given in respect to the mass fractions of each of these components, but having three species in B, if we know that two of them, composition of two of the species, we can figure it out that composition of the water in this case would be equal to 1 minus fraction of H2SO4 and HNO3. For component B we have three species, but in fact we have two unknowns here. For A we have two species, sulfuric acid and water. If we know the fraction of water, if for example water is 50%, the sulfuric acid would be 100% minus 50% would be equal to 50%. So in fact here we have one unknown in terms of the composition. For component C we have two species, nitric acid and water. In terms of the unknown we have one unknown, and for component D we have three components, three species, sulfuric acid, nitric acid and water. So it will give us two unknowns. So here we have fractions or compositions. We have three unknown masses, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fractions. Therefore 6 plus 3 is equal to 9. Now we look at the number of independent equations, and number of independent equations would be equal to the number of chemical species. How many species do we have? We have three species. We have sulfuric acid, nitric acid and water. Therefore n would be equal 9 minus 3, which is equal to 6. So 6 pieces of information we need to know in order to have n equal to 0. When n is equal to 0 we can solve the problem.